morning, good evening, and good afternoon, lovely people, depending on where you are watching us from. I'm really quite touched about today's topic because you and I, Patty, have connected quite some time ago via LinkedIn, and we've sort of been across each other's posts and following and liking because we work in a similar realm, I want to call it. And we are both very much on the path of how can we make grief a little bit lighter and more, and have tools more accessible for people to actually work through that. But before we get into that, I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience, please. Welcome. I'm so happy that you're here, Patty.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. A little bit about me. I am first and foremost a mom to four amazing children, one of whom happens to be forever 19. And his name is Zachary. In my line of work, what I do is deal with mental illness every single day. And I chose that career path just because of what was going on in my life and what my children were struggling with. And I just wanted to be more equipped and prepared for whatever challenges may come along the way. And ultimately, I ended up losing my 19-year-old son, Zachary, just 9 months ago to suicide. And it's been quite a journey. I would love to say that this is my first foray, but it isn't. We lost his father 12 years prior to suicide as well. And 3 months before my son died, my father passed away very, very suddenly in an unfortunate accident. So I'm no stranger to this, and it's actually what I do every day. When I go to quote unquote the office, it's what I deal with. So I'm immersed in it all the time.
Yeah.
The grief, the mental illness, the all of it, the struggles, every day.
I would like to put a little disclaimer in here, Patty, and thank you so much. I really mean it. I cannot thank you enough for being here and sharing so straight from your heart and in such a truthful and raw manner because you sitting here 9 months after your son's passing is like all inspiring for me because it is the message that you have that is so important and is not just the fact that you work in that, but you work in that to actually find ways to support him in this. And now you still work in this space. So to me, you are one of the most inspiring people I have met in my entire life because of the way you have chosen to walk through life. And the disclaimer I want to put in here is that you and I had a pre-chat before we came live here, and I said, this is a rather deep topic. Is there anything that is off limits? And you were like, nope, I want to talk about everything. I want to share everything. And that to me, and I really believe I can say this here also for my audience, is a huge gift. So I just wanted to put that up front. I do want to put it in as a disclaimer because it is a sensitive topic. So for people who would rather not hear us talk about suicide, please switch off now. I mean it because this is a conversation that I feel has to be had. We do need to talk about these things more openly, need to talk about grief more openly, but also in particular, the path that you have been on to get to where you are now is raw and real. And I would like to take you back to the beginning, if that's okay, because you said that you lost your ex-husband first to suicide as well. And I would like to know, where were you at on that path back then? Was that a reason that made you choose that path? Give us a bit of a timeline, if that's okay, so people know your path.
Of course, yeah. I meant it when I said nothing is off limits. I mean,
Thank you.
we
I really
have, we
appreciate
have,
that.
oh, absolutely. We have to get comfortable having these uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
It's the only way that will create change. I firmly believe that in my heart. So
Same.
yes, any topic is totally fine. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't, is how I look at it.
Yeah.
Uh, but to take you back, just very briefly, I was married to my ex-husband, and he struggled a lot with mental illness, with addiction. And at the point where we had three children, I had to say, I can't make him want to get better, but
Hmm.
I do have a responsibility to my children.
Yeah.
And I was terrified that one day they would come home and find his body,
Mm.
because I could already see into the future. I can't explain how, but I just knew that he was not going to have a good outcome from all of
Mm.
this. So I had to make a very, very tough decision. I still loved my husband, but as I've said in the past, in
Mm.
other interviews, I love my children more.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had it was a very tough decision. It was not easy by any means. However, I brought my children into the world to protect them and give them everything
Mm.
that they needed. Um, I had to carry that all the way through, even if that meant distancing them from their father, which is what
Yeah.
ultimately happened. And he died not too long after. And that was my biggest fear, was that my children would be present and somehow be forever scarred from
Yeah.
something so horrific. Um,
So could
Luckily,
you save them from that? They
could I
did
what?
not have to. Could you save them from that? They did not have to find his body, correct?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely correct. It was devastating for them to lose their father, but I feel like, as you and perhaps most of your audience already knows, there's another huge layer that gets added on top when suicide is involved. It's not
Yeah.
just the grief, but then it's the manner in which they left. And I just didn't want that for my children, who
Yeah.
clearly had no coping skills. So um, it certainly is what uh, made me consider going into this field, because
Hmm.
I knew the statistics. I knew that genetically my children would be predisposed to this. And there
Yeah.
was a very good chance that at least one of my children would be battling the very same thing.
Hmm.
So that is, in fact,
Can
what
can
happened.
we talk about that a little bit? Because I
Of
think, like, I'm very, very big on epigenetics. It is something that I only discovered very late in life, and it was a really important topic for me because my dad's dad had passed early, my dad has passed early, and then their dad has passed early. So having two boys and having this from both their genetic lines, it was a really important topic for me to delve into deeply and very thoroughly. So, you have a nursing background, you have a background in helping people through mental illnesses. Mental health is such a goal to get to for all of us, but in particular, when things like suicide are involved, of course, the alarm bells come on when you think of epigenetics, and you're like, I don't want my kids to experience this, or even to experience the battle to the potential outcome. Can you share a little bit from your medical background about what that actually means? Because some people are not familiar with epigenetics, and some people might be sitting there going like, what do you mean? How is this even a part of them, or could be a part of them? I'd like your medical expertise on that.
Sure. I mean, we certainly have heard the argument of nature versus nurture, right? Countless times.
Mm.
I certainly thought I could nurture my son to safety and into adulthood. Um, and I tried, everything that I could within my power to keep him from having the same outcome as his father. I remember very clearly standing in the psychiatrist's office when he wanted to put Zachary on medication for ADHD. And I
Mm.
said, if I don't put him on medication, I know what will happen. He says, correct. You've looked at the data. If you don't put your son on medication, the chances of him self medicating later on in life skyrockets. I said,
Mm.
well, and I don't want my son to have the same outcome as his father and battle with mental illness and drugs and
Yeah.
alcoholism. And I remember standing there in his office sobbing. I said, I just don't want him to have the same outcome. And he said, well, he's a different child. He's not his father.
Mm.
And he has a mother who loves him very much. he doesn't have to have the same outcome. And I said,
Mm,
you're right. So we know that genetics are powerful and they play a
mhm,
very big role, right? In so many things. We can eat healthy, we can exercise, we can keep stress down, and we can still have high blood pressure. Why? Both of our parents had it. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? It's like
yeah.
we don't have to make things worse, but sometimes our genetics do win out.
Mm,
So because of this, I had lots of open conversations with my children, was very open and honest. And again, like I've said to you and in our pre-interview, I
mm,
wanted them to talk about it like people talk about sports, like people
yeah.
talk about weather. We normalized the discussions because I always thought knowledge was power. If you
Mm,
know what you're up against, you'll be prepared. I never wanted my children to be blindsided. And of
yeah.
course, it was no shame that their father was not well. We never condemned him. We talked about him
Mhm,
openly, freely, laughed about the good times and the good memories. His name
mm.
was ever present in our home
I
the
love that.
whole time we were growing up, the whole time.
Mhm.
Um, so I figured, we'll
Can I
talk
just,
about.
sorry,
Sure, sure.
sorry to interrupt you for one quick moment, just so we understand. How old were your children? Roughly give us a frame from two when their dad passed away.
When their dad passed away, it was 2012.
Hmm.
So my oldest would have been 18. My oldest boy would have been 10.
Hmm.
And my youngest boy, Zach, because I only had three children at the time,
Hmm.
he would have been 8, I think
Hmm.
8. So an adult and
Yeah,
two small
10 and 8.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but we had these discussions and we talked about them openly, and I normalized therapy for them. Every
Mm.
time they struggled, we went to therapy. When their father passed away, they were in grief therapy within 24 hours. They were
Yeah.
already in the office of a grief counselor, all three of
Mm.
them. And it was non-negotiable. Well, I don't want
Mm.
to go. No, you must go. You must
Mm.
go. So again, these are conversations we've had since they were little, since their father
Mm.
passed away. Um, However, uh, we come to the present day, and here I am talking about my son in the past tense.
Mm.
And I did everything that I humanly could, but as we know, we're not supposed to treat our own children.
Mm.
Um, that certainly brings in some complicated relationships into a kind of a strained position because
Mm.
you don't really want to tell your mom everything.
Yeah. As a
So,
teenager in particular.
correct,
Yeah.
even though Zachary and I were super close, at
Mm.
the end of the day, I mean, I was a mental health provider, but I was his mom first. So
Mm.
I'm not convinced that Zachary was 100% honest with me.
Yeah.
And I could only take him at his word.
Mm.
But my son was clearly struggling more than he let on.
Hmm.
Uh, and my son suffered some devastating burns in 2022 when our home burned down.
Oh my
And
God.
I think that my son's injuries, although they were horrific on the outside, were probably worse on the inside. And that's what we couldn't see.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. I know this is a confronting question, but you said with your husband at the time, you saw the outcome, you could see into the future. Did you at any stage have that with Zach?
I did. I did have that with Zach. As a matter of fact, I would say maybe a month before my son died, I said to my
Mm.
husband, Zachary's not going to be around very long. It's every day is just filled with anguish. How does a human being continue on that way forever? It's impossible to sustain.
Hmm.
I don't, I don't, I never had thoughts or images of the future with my son Zachary. I never saw him as an adult. I never, my other children I did, but with Zachary I didn't. And
Mm.
Zachary was also on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
He did have high functioning autism. It was a very, very real concern for me. What will happen to my son if I die first? I
Mm-hmm.
was terrified of that.
Yeah.
Um, and as maybe callous or unfeeling as this may sound, it is a relief that my son left this earth before me, because I didn't know if he would ever be able to live independently, and who would
Mm-hmm.
care for him like his mother. In my
Yeah.
eyes, nobody could. So parents that have children with special needs will understand what I mean when I say that.
Mm.
But it terrified me. It terrified me. My son was struggling every day.
I I have to say I am really grateful, although I'm sitting here with like goosebumps all over my body just listening to you and having this conversation. And on the other hand, I know how important it is to talk about these things so openly. And I am grateful that you named what a lot of people think, the the terror, the terrifying thoughts, the fear, what happens if I go. And for me, that was a very, very real fear that I couldn't shake for a really long time. I went to therapy after Rob passed away. And Rob being my husband, for most people would know this who've been watching me for a while here, but the boys were 10 and 8, just like your younger ones, same age, when they lost their dad. And my biggest fear was, what if something happens to me as well? How would they cope? How would that affect their life? How would anybody ever care for them the way that I do, the way that we had? Um,
Right.
and I have to say, and I want to share this very quickly because I would like to put this back to you as a question. There was a time, and it was roughly 9 months after Rob's passing, that my older son actually asked me that question. Said, Mom, what would happen to us if you were to die? And I cannot put into words the relief I felt that he asked me that question, because I felt I really wanted them to know this. And I also felt if I was to mention that now, the fear that I would bring into their little hearts, to think, oh my God, what if mom dies now? I didn't want them to go there. So I had to wait for a moment that presented itself, which it did when Flynn asked me that question. And he was 11 at the time, so they were 11 and 9. And he just asked it straight out. We were upstairs folding, washing, and he's like, Mom, what would happen to us if you were to die? And I said, well, let's talk about it. And I made the conversation really light, bit
Yeah.
of jokes in there, and we talked about like how I always felt that I would turn 93, and my son's like, do you think you can make it to 100? So it became this sort of light. I said, yeah, I can try for 100. But I did have the chance to talk to them. So if something was to happen to you, you would go to Uncle Renzo, which is my husband's eldest brother, and I knew that he had everything it takes to take care of them, especially enough love for them. And that's what you want for your kids. So I was glad that they knew, but I would have honestly not known how to bring this conversation up when they were 10 and 8, or then 9 and 11, without worrying that I'm now instilling some fear in them. Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. What if mom dies? How and when did you address that question with them? Did you address that question with them? What would happen
Well,
if?
about my own
What's
demise.
Yes.
It's not come up, uh,
Mm.
but they're mostly adults now.
Yeah.
I don't think that it would be um, such a difficult topic, although it is far too soon, I think, to bring it up
Mm.
since they just lost their
Yeah.
brother. But my
Yeah.
youngest is 16 and my oldest is 31.
Mm.
So there's quite a an age span there. However, they're mostly all grown up. Uh,
Mm.
but I do know that, just to go back to what you said previously, You
Mm.
know, we celebrate and normalize births all the time,
Mm.
right? And deaths, it's like, oh, nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody,
Exactly.
I,
Yeah.
but none of us is getting out of here alive.
Mm.
None of us.
Yeah.
None of us. And if grief has not affected your life yet, just
Mm.
wait. It will.
Mm.
It's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
However, we don't have these discussions. We don't have these talks about I mean, there's so many things we can discuss. I've said to my children, kind of in jest, when I cross over to the other side, what would you like me to send you as a sign? What do you want to look for?
Mm.
Like, what? How do I know what to send you? You want
Mhm.
pennies? You want feathers? You want a blue jay? What would
Butterflies.
you like? Right. So
Yeah.
we don't have those conversations, and nobody wants to have them. However, what's the big deal, right? We know it's
Mm.
going to happen. We can't normalize it in our society. It's
Mm.
not in ours. In others, of
Yeah.
course, it
Exactly. It's
is.
such a cultural thing, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is a cultural thing. However, I will say I was scared of dying before my son died, and now
Mm.
I'm not. Now I'm just not. Now I think to myself, you know what?
Mm.
Every time I wake up, I'm one day closer to being reunited with my child again.
Mm.
And some people may think, well, that's kind of it's an odd or morbid thing to say. It's changed my perspective on so many things, losing a
Mm.
child. It's just changed
Yeah.
everything. I call it my life quake moment.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you know, there's life before the passing of
Yeah.
your person and then life after the passing of your,
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
yeah.
I often talk about my life before and after Rob. It really is. And I also, and this is very different. Well, no, it's actually not. Let me just say it. I also often talk about the fact that there was a life without Rob before I met him. And that was certainly different to my life without Rob after he died. Very different. Both lives without Rob, but very different. But the fact that I was able to live a happy life before I met him also gave me hope that I could live a happy life after he passed. So it's something that people go like, that's a really odd comparison, but sometimes you just really need
Yeah.
to look at facts in a very neutral manner, and that has really helped me. So I get what you say. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if my transition in terms of thinking about that has happened in the same way like yours. I doubt it. But I also got to the point where I lost my fear of dying. But what I didn't lose was the fear of what would happen to my boys if I was to go. So that was very different. I wasn't scared of dying anymore, but I was worried about what it could do to them if I was to go too early. And too early is a very, it's a very human perspective as to what's too early, what's the right time. Um,
Right. They'll
I
never
want
be
to,
able to let us go, right? It'll never be a good
yeah,
time. It'll
no,
never be a good
there's never a good
time.
time to pass,
Right.
really. But I want to ask you again, a very confronting but very direct question, and I know that's what we're here for.
Oh, yes.
How can you be sitting here having this conversation in such a nurturing and helpful manner 9 months after your son died? Can you share what brought you to this moment of a moment to this place, I want to say, where you can speak from your heart and so directly about suicide?
Well, as I've said, it's not my first foray into this realm.
Yeah.
I did have to have my first exposure to it when I had to take my children to watch their father be buried in a casket. I mean, it's
Mm.
all of a sudden you're a single parent and you have to nurture these three grieving children and somehow find a way to nurture yourself through your own grief. So it's not my first rodeo, as we say here.
Mm.
Then I mentioned that our house burned down and I lost everything that I worked so hard for was gone in
How long after?
25 minutes. So my
No, I
husband,
mean, how long after your husband passed that the
oh,
house
this would
burned
have
down?
been 10 years later,
Wow.
2012 to 2022.
Yeah.
So I had raised my children and gone to school and, busted my behind as a single parent to get a career going that could
Mm,
sustain us all. So I had worked
mm,
really, really hard. And it was all gone in
mm.
35 minutes. That is another form of grief, right?
Yes.
They're just material things. It's just stuff. Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
but for you, it was a
However,
home.
right. And when your child is severely injured in a fire,
Mm,
you even more so say, who cares about the stuff? Who cares about the
yeah.
thing? My child is
Yeah.
alive. And that's precisely what happened. So there was grief for the home that we lost and everything in it. There was grief for my son and his horrific injuries that I
Mm,
had to help nurse him back from.
mm,
Um, and my father passed away last June. Literally, this past Sunday was a year, and he died in a very unexpected way. And then less than 3 months later, my son passed away. I say all that to say I've had a lot of preparation.
yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that I've been prepared for what was going to be ultimately the biggest loss of my entire life, which was losing my son. I didn't know that at the time.
Mm,
However, I do feel, because people would say, how much can one person go through? My goodness, that like enough, right?
yeah.
And I'm condensing this. There's so much more in there that I'm just
Mm,
glossing over for time. However, I'm a firm believer in we don't just suffer unnecessarily. There's a reason. I
mm,
believe, and no one has to agree with it, that I was
yeah.
being prepared for this.
Yeah.
So we learn we can do hard things, is what it
Mm,
teaches us. I knew I had come through many adversities that most people may not have been able to get through, and I did so, was able to tell the tale. When my son passed away, I said that day, I will not be one of those parents that's stuck in their grief 10, 20 years later. That will not ever be me. And I meant it.
wow.
I
Yeah.
meant it
Wow.
because
That is huge.
I'm
That
because
is
I'm not
huge.
scared of doing hard things.
Yeah.
Grief is hard.
Patty, what do you think got you through that? What do you think helped you do the hard things?
My resolve, my DNA, I'm not scared to do hard things.
Mm,
I'm not scared at all. I very much believe I was chosen for this. I was chosen to be Zachary's mom. Why? I
mm,
could handle it. I could do this.
mm.
I didn't know what was coming down the pike, but
Of course not.
I know myself, and I
Mm,
know that I'm not scared and I don't back down, and hard things don't terrify me where I'll say, "Oh, I'm not going to do that." No.
mm.
That's just not who I am. And it's interesting because in one of my Mother's Day cards or one of my birthday cards, Zachary wrote, I admire your grit. So my son recognized that in me and told me, that I'm one of the toughest people he'd ever met. Um, I think that that's true. I think
Beautiful.
that that's true.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Pat, your story is so inspiring, and I also know at the same time it's often not what we really want to hear when we've gone through it. It's one of the last things that you want to hear, that you're inspiring or strong. And on the other hand, I just want to say I'm really, really grateful that your three living children have got you around to help them through this and to help them um, gain a different perspective on life. And that to me is the most inspiring thing that one can do, to not lose perspective on what gift life per se actually is. And for you to sit here today and look back and said, I've been prepared for this, I've
Mm-hmm.
been chosen, that gives me goosebumps. That is something that my beliefs are very, very similar to yours around that. So I really want to thank you for being here and sharing your story so
Absolutely.
authentically and straight from your heart. Before I let you go, though, if there is one thing that you can say to any parent out there listening that may worry about their sons, their daughters' mental health, is there anything that you can give them that will give them hope or strength right now?
Um, it's humans are so complicated, right? There's no one cookie cutter response for anything.
Mm,
Uh, but what I encourage parents um, to do actually starts before their child has a crisis or before
mm,
they're in trouble. And that is, we just need to normalize our own struggles and we need to verbalize them to our children. Our children think that we wear these capes and there's nothing that we can't do.
so true.
We don't tell them how we struggle, though. We don't tell them, my boss really was on my back this week. This is the hardest week I've never come so close to quitting my job like I did this week. Not that we need to come and dump these things on our
Yeah.
children, but we need to let them know we all
Mm,
struggle. It's
yeah.
normal, right?
Mm,
Here's how I handled it. Have you
yeah.
ever encountered X, Y, and Z? How did you handle it?
Mm,
These are the things that we need to do because if we don't let them know that we struggle and we don't make ourselves vulnerable, how can we expect them to come to us in their time of
mm.
need? Why am
That
I
is
going
so
to go to
true.
dad? Why am I going to go to
Yeah.
dad? He's got it all figured out. He doesn't have any problems. He won't
Mm,
understand. Oh, dad will understand. Dad has been 15 and 16. Let me
yeah.
tell you about it, right?
Yeah.
But we need to have more of these discussions. We need to normalize our
Mm,
need to go to therapy and
yeah.
seek help for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm not in a good headspace. I want to be the best parent to you and your siblings that I can be.
Mm,
And I'm going to go to therapy starting next week. How do you feel about that? Do you
yeah.
think you would like to go? Would you like to come to a family session? Maybe we all can
Mm,
chat together. We
mm,
have to start having these talks before there's a crisis. At that
yeah.
point, it's all hands on deck and it's an emergency. Let's be
Yeah.
more on the preventive end. If I could say one thing, it would be that.
Thank
It
you.
has to start with the parents. You're welcome.
I love that. And I have to add, my sons don't love anything more than listening to my blooper reel from my teenager years, all the things that we've done or stuffed up or, you know, gotten in trouble for at school. It's always like, Mom, can you tell us that story again when you
Oh,
got in
they
trouble
love
and we
it.
all had
They
to go to the
love
principal
it.
and, oh my God, we've done
Yeah.
some silly and stupid things. And yeah, but
Yeah.
I
I've told my
trust what you
children,
say, that
yeah,
keep it
I've told my
real.
children I barely graduated high school because I was
Mm.
so bad. And they're like, oh, no. Oh, yes, I was. Oh, yes, and they love it. Like, let's
It
normalize
takes the
those.
pressure off. It takes the pressure off that
Correct.
you have to be
Yeah.
perfect. And I also said to my son a couple of times, I said, it's the first time that I'm a mom to a 17-year-old. This is like, I wasn't born knowing what to do with that. I'm learning as I go. I'm learning what it means to do a HSC in Australia for the first time because I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Austria. This school system is different. I'm learning this with you. So, keeping yourself human and making them understand that you don't have it all sorted, but also keeping them safe at the same time. There's a fine line between, oh, I can't take care of you, or, hey, I haven't got everything figured out. So again, keep the balance, keep it real. I know that you've got dinner plans, so I will wrap this up here. And I truly hope that you have an amazing night out tonight.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and for being so vulnerable and open about this journey. There is no one word answer for anything, but having these conversations really does help. So I'm really grateful that you and I had this conversation today. It might be a start for somebody else listening and being inspired to have that conversation at home. And if it's just one family, this was already worth it. So, Patty, Thank you for being here. Have an amazing night. And
Thank you so
anyone,
much.
thank you. Anyone who wants to connect with Patty, I'll come back and put the details in the show notes so you can reach out to her. So thank you. This is
Thank you so
Patty
much.
and Marie signing off. Bye for now.
Bye bye.